Hello there guys. In this video I'm finally getting around to adding some stowage and some figures to this DUKW or DUK which I made a few months ago. I downloaded and 3D printed these figures from one of my favourite creators. He's got a huge range of models on both Cults 3D and CG Trader, and as you can see they cover a wide range of themes from World War II figures, medieval knights, fantasy figures and all kinds of other subjects. They're quite handily colour-coded, so the green ones are US World War II figures, the sort of blue-grey ones are World War II German figures, and so on. And the particular set that I'm printing for this video is this one here. American Soldiers World War II Lunch. As you can see we get 8 figures here, 7 of them sitting down, 1 standing up, and a few accessories like the wooden bench and the sandbags. I have printed these figures before and shown you them in another video, but I never actually got around to painting them. And since that previous video I've got my new 4K Creality printer, so I've reprinted them, this time in 4K. Here are 3 of the figures loaded into my slicing software, and as you can see the level of detail looks really good. I had to do a couple of things to prepare them for printing. The first was scale them because these are in 1/25th scale. So to convert to another scale, you simply take the scale they're in and divide by the scale you want to go to. So these are in 25th scale, so 25 divided by 35 gives me 0.714. Multiply that by 100 and that gives you the percentage you need to change it by. So I need to scale these to 71.4% of their current size to give me the 1/35th size. I also need to orientate them for better printing and add supports. And for various reasons, using a 45-degree angle tends to be best for resin printing. Once I'd printed these figures on my Creality Halo Mage Pro, I was then able to wash and cure them using the new Creality WW2 wash and cure machine, which Creality very kindly sent me for free. This is a really useful wash and cure machine, and it goes hand in hand with the Mage Pro because it has a basket and a container big enough to take the Mage Pro print bed. You can see here, for example, as I set it up initially, just how large that plastic container is and the size of the prints that you can get in there. It also comes with this mirrored turntable where we will place the prints after washing in order to be cured. We've got a fairly simple user interface. 2 modes, wash or cure, 2 speeds, quick or normal, and that is speed of the rotation of the turntable, not the amount of time. And then we've got the amount of time, plus a button to start and to pause things. Now you have to excuse the lighting quality a little bit here. This is set up in my garage, and in order to keep the temperature constant and so hopefully have fewer failures in resin printing, it's inside one of those grow tents that people commonly use for growing tomatoes and things. With the plastic container in place, I put about 4 litres of isopropyl alcohol in there. Depending on the size of the model, you may well need more than that. Then our 3D printed model goes into the basket. In this case it's not my figures, it's some roof tiles for a future diorama. The basket drops into the isopropyl. The UV protection lid goes on, and with this machine we need that UV protection lid in place to start it up, even if we're not using the UV cure mode. Set it to cure, normal speed, hit start, and you can just about see the isopropyl there swirling around inside as the fan at the bottom does its job of moving the liquid around. After a few minutes the washing is finished, and I like to remove the basket from the isopropyl but then just sort of hang it above the container so that the model can drip free for half an hour or so first, because really you want the model to be dry before you start to cure it. Then we remove the IPA container, put the mirror in place and put our models on there. Set the mode to UV cure and away she goes. And again, although we have the turntable turning in both directions, and the mirrored floor, I do like to pause this halfway through and just rotate the figures to make sure that everything is getting 100% cured. You'll also notice that I've removed the supports before I've done the cure. Putting the figures aside for a moment, I needed to build some stowage for the back of the duck for the soldiers to be sitting on and around. Here I have a few bits from the spare parts box. I've accumulated these from various models over the years, and I've got some 3D printed parts there as well, particularly those US jerry cans. I am going to have to build a bit more storage myself though, because of course the back of the duck is quite a large area. Now here's something I've had in my spares box for quite a long time. I bought these ages ago, and they're basically paper boxes. You cut them out and fold them into box shapes for K rations. As you can see here, you've got like an overall container and then an inner container with even smaller containers in those. All you do is cut them out, fold them along the indicated lines, and then use a bit of PVA or similar to glue them into position. So this is one of the outer boxes. With the wrapper that goes around it. I'm not quite sure what to do about painting these because the paper on its own doesn't look super realistic. Here we've got some 3D printed jerry cans, and believe it or not, I painted all of these with just two colours. That was a NATO black base coat with varying degrees of opacity, followed by an olive drab top coat, again with varying degrees of opacity. And that gives us this natural variation here without any one can really standing out from the crowd. What I also tried to do was make some generic boxes covered in tarps by taking some XPS foam, cutting it into a cuboid shape, and in this case here I've covered it with a piece of latex glove cut out in a square shape. I first used this technique on my recent LCM diorama and it seemed to work fairly well. You do have to be careful not to put too much glue down, otherwise the latex will conform exactly to the foam and you'll get a very flat look. The downside is it doesn't take paint super well. I found the best thing is Vallejo model colour, put on quite thickly. And I think that looks reasonable. Moving on now to painting the figures. Here are two of our figures. As you can see, the detail is lovely, and they've got that nice matte finish now they've been properly washed and cured. This is our standing soldier. I've got to do a bit of cleanup still on that rifle strap, but even the fact that the rifle strap printed is a testament to the quality of that printer. I tried a couple of permutations of stowage and figures before I decided upon something like this, with the figures sat around in the back enjoying their lunch. Next up was painting the figures, and that's something I've struggled with in the past, although I did quite like the technique I used and I was quite pleased with the results on my omnibus ambulance with the World War I figures that I did recently. So I went for a similar approach to that. So these figures were primed in Tamiya grey primer and then shot from below with XF69 NATO black to try to create some shadow areas. I did also shoot from above with some white to create a highlight area, but because I went overkill on the World War I figures with the white, I tried to tone that down a bit for these figures, and I probably toned it down a bit too much. But nevertheless, this should provide a little bit of shading for the subsequent coats. So for the US uniform, we've got two options. We've got the 1942 to 1944 version, and then we've got the late 44-45 version. There are probably quite a few differences, but the key difference there is that the later version has a longer jacket, and the earlier version is in khaki with field drab trousers, whereas the later version, the jacket and the trousers are the same colour, and they're a kind of green colour, dark green colour. I basically used this image here from the back of the Vallejo paint box as my guide. And I decided that most of these figures will be in the late uniform, but to break it up a bit, a couple of them will be in the older uniform. These are the colours I'm going to be using. They're all Vallejo model colour. Khaki for the older uniform, dark green for the newer one, and then the US field drab for the older trousers. Very much like I did in my World War I video, I'm applying a light glaze here to these figures. This is quite heavily thinned, it's not really much more than dirty water. I'm applying it a little bit too heavy here because it shouldn't act like a wash, it shouldn't pool in the recesses. Instead it should just very lightly stain the underlying model to change its colour. And the idea being, of course, that the pre-shading will hopefully show through and change the colour there of that top coat. This is one of the older jackets I'm painting. And then moving on to one of the newer jackets. Again, I'm putting a bit too much paint on there, so I need to spread it out very thin. And you can see it's just ever so slightly discolouring the underlying model. Ideally, if you do this right, it should come out as a very matte, desaturated colour. And of course, I will need multiple coats here, probably 5 or 6 coats, to get the colour depth that I need. Here you can see a quick comparison between two figures after, I think this was 2 coats of the glaze. So I continued that process. As I add the later layers, you can start to see the shadows and the highlights becoming more apparent. Here, for example, the figure on the left has had 3 or 4 coats, and the figure on the right has had 7 or 8 coats, and is now finished. Once the uniform colours were done, it was time for the detail painting. I used an olive drab-ish colour for the helmets. And I did go for the recommended grey-green for the webbing and the ammunition pouches, but then I didn't really like the look of that. It looked a little bit too grey to me. So I switched that, after looking at some references, to a more sort of sandy beige colour. One of the downsides of the Vallejo model colour is they're quite soft paints, and even just handling them like this, you're guaranteed to more or less rub some off on the contact points. Because of that, once I got most of the details done, I gave everything a coat of VMS matte varnish to try and secure that paint, and then I went back and did the final details and touched up any damaged points. I was leaving the flesh tones until last because those are the ones I struggle with the most. These are the 2 paints I used, AK Base Flesh and AK Light Flesh. These come in a box which feature 5 different shades, all for flesh. But to be honest, I can never apply them effectively enough to make good use of all 5 colours, so I just tend to use these 2 colours. Thinning them down with water, I use the base flesh colour, as you might imagine. And then while that was still wet, I did some of the light flesh colour on top. In some cases I was quite happy with the result, in other cases not so much so. Really I need to focus now on which techniques lead to the ones I'm happy with and which ones lead to the ones that need doing again. The hands were a bit easier because I painted them in the base flesh and then essentially sort of dry brushed on the light flesh over the fingers. The hair was another colour where I tried to use at least 2 shades. So for example here I've got the black base layer and then I'm going over with a grey-brown top layer to try to break that up. Moving on, the next step was to do an oil paint pin wash, and I did this using my trusty old Artejaol 502 sepia oil paint, thinned with odourless thinner. In the same way that we use a pin wash to highlight panel lines on vehicles, I'm trying to highlight the seams and folds here. I actually have my oil paint a bit too thick here at first. Just trying to make the detail stand out. It doesn't matter too much if the oil paint spreads to other areas, because of course these uniforms would be very dirty. I also applied the pin wash to the face, in particular to the eyes and the mouth, to try to get some definition there of those features. I used the same pin wash for the stowage items, so these wooden boxes here with K rations got quite a heavy wash. As did the tarps and so on the back of the vehicle. I probably should have tested the wash on a sample cardboard box before using the real ones, but I didn't, and it didn't look very good. Having said that, I then decided that the boxes don't look good in general. They don't look realistic. They need painting or something to make them blend in with the rest of the stowage. And so ultimately I decided to pull them out and replace them with something else. That's a bit of a shame really, because the printing looks nice, but I think that's always the way with something that you use in its natural form. It's the same as static grass. If you don't paint it, it just doesn't quite look right. The final steps in the painting of the figures involve the highlights. For this I took the base colour and lightened it ever so slightly, and then dry brushed it onto the figures, trying to catch just those highlighted raised folds in the uniforms. I probably should have done this before I did the detail painting, and that way I wouldn't have to avoid all of the straps and the webbing and so on when doing this now. I applied the same dry brushing technique to the stowage. And then finally, because I always fail to make my figures dirty enough, I used some earth pigment, liberally applied all over the figures, particularly of course on the lower half, the boots and the trousers. And at that point I felt like my mini diorama was ready. And there we go guys, that was my painting of the 3D printed figures having lunch in the back of my DUKW duck. I had a lot of fun painting these, and I do feel like my figure painting skills are slowly improving, although they've still got quite a lot of room for improvement still. I will point out that you can see the layer lines on some of the figures here. That's not because of the quality of the figures, or even because of the quality of the printer. It's just that the lens is so good that it picks out lots of details that you simply can't see with the human eye. I'm really lucky to have this Canon macro lens, but it really does pick out even the smallest details. have a look at these photos that I've taken with it and you can see exactly what I mean. So it does highlight flaws in the models that are invisible to the naked eye. I've got a lot more figures that I need to 3D print and paint in the future, so hopefully I'll get around to some of those soon. I've also got lots of other projects in progress. Off the top of my head, we've got the Manchester, which is really just waiting for paint now. We've got the Avro York, which is waiting for some construction, some filling and some sanding. I've got the Tamiya M3 half-track, which I built recently and needs painting and weathering. And of course, not forgetting two really long-standing projects that I need to get off that shelf of doom. The Prince of Wales from Tamiya in 1/350 scale. That simply needs the photo etch doing. I haven't touched that since the last video, unfortunately. And my Ardennes diorama, which I featured in a couple of videos, and will ultimately have the Panther being converted into an M10, or a fake M10 should I say, and a Stug being converted into a Priest. Again, I just need to pick those projects up and get back into the flow of them really. But it will happen. Anyway, I would like to say thank you to all of you for watching. As you may have seen, it was my channel's 6th birthday recently, and I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given me over that time. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members, and welcome to Mike Webber and Keith R, who have joined Patreon this month, and to Ian Roberts and LED57, who have recently joined the YouTube membership program. Thank you guys, it's much appreciated. I will be back with another video soon, so until then, thank you again for watching and have fun modelling.